The Navigating PVS podcast is for general knowledge and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any health concerns. I'm Joly. I'm here with Haley Jezewski, and we have already started talking because that's what we do. Every mom that I've spoken with, we just dive right in and we start talking about a million things.
Definitely.
We started talking about how our girls both love to be cold. Uh,
Yeah,
I joke with everybody that we're gonna change Summer's name from Summer to January because January Joly has like a really nice ring to it.
it does.
It does, right? Summer Joly does too, but she does not like to be hot. It's not a very good name for her. Let's go all the way back. So you reached out shortly after I released the podcast, and you just celebrated Emma's first birthday. So congrats, it's
Yeah,
huge. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you, not just that our girls have a shared kind of disease profile and they both love the cold, which we just found out, but one of the reasons I was very excited to talk to you, can you take me all the way back? You are doing
yeah.
this PVS journey and you're a military person, and Emma's dad is too. So can you take me back and just give me that background and then kind of layer into Emma joining the world?
Yeah, so actually, I have been out of the military for a hot minute. I got out in 2019. I was a signals intelligence analyst. I met Emma's dad, Douglas, in early 2023. I had actually just moved to Illinois and we had matched on it was Facebook dating, like the dating part of Facebook.
Okay.
And he turns out he was also an intelligence analyst, but with the Illinois National Guard. And that was sort of how we started bonding, was just our shared experience in the military. So he's been in the National Guard almost 6 years. He actually gets out next June.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not go into the military myself, but my dad, Kurt's father, every man in our families have served. And so I really thank you for your service. You had mentioned in our communications prior to this how that had been challenging with Emma's dad and some of those things. And then also just how you feel like has that prepped you for this journey?
Yeah. So the whole situation with him being in the National Guard and Emma's pulmonary vein stenosis, she was in the NICU the first 4 months of her life. She had those two open heart surgeries. I don't know if you're aware, but the National Guard is not entitled to parental leave at all. So when Emma was born, Douglas had actually looked up the federal regulation in regards to parental leave and was under the impression that he would have about 3 months off from having to go to drill. And that was not the case. His unit basically told him, like, hey, we don't go by the federal standards. You're going to go to drill. And it was a lot of back and forth to the point that they wanted him to go to drill, I think the day after Emma had her second open heart surgery, which was an emergency revision surgery.
Oh.
And he was essentially saying, well, I'm just going to go AWOL and you can do with that what you will because I need to stay here with my daughter.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm sure everybody's experience is different when it comes to having a medically complex child and being in the military. Our particular experience wasn't that great.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
He has since returned.
Yeah, so Emma was born October of 2024, and they allowed him to not go to drill that month, but they
Okay.
wanted him to go back in November. Her PVS had not been diagnosed then, but she was still in the NICU, just having some problems. So then they let him stay home another month, and they were like, we'll get back to you in January. She was having her surgeries in January. There were complications, and his commander isn't very family first, just very mission first. It doesn't really matter what you have going on, you need to be here. And he had a few other higher ranking officials advocating for him, and that allowed him to stay in Madison with us a little bit longer. And he actually ended up returning to drill, I want to say it was March. So it was,
Okay.
yeah, the very first month we were home, he went back to drill.
Good. I'm so glad that he had those advocates and,
Yeah.
the whole it takes a village thing is so true in PVS. Let's go back to Emma's birth. She was in the NICU in Illinois, correct?
Yeah, she was born in Rockford. That's where I had just been receiving all of my OB care. When I was pregnant, 10 weeks into my pregnancy, was diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic. So I had a high risk pregnancy. I had developed gestational hypertension. She was IUGR. So I was seeing maternal fetal medicine and my OB in Rockford, and that's where she was born. I was actually it was an attempted induction at 37 weeks that ultimately turned into an emergency C-section.
Okay. So the attempt induction, that doesn't go well. She has to,
Yeah. When I was 36 and 6, my OB was like, "Hey, your blood pressure just keeps getting higher and higher." We were having trouble controlling my blood sugar. It was actually way too low. Like my blood sugar was dipping into the 40s in the middle of the night. And she was like, "Emma is not growing. She is below the first percentile. We need to get her out. So I'm going to induce you tomorrow." So we went into the hospital. I think it was like 8 in the morning the next day. We lived 45 minutes from the hospital.
oh, so
So
it's not
we live,
close.
yeah, we're sort of in Chicagoland, and Emma was born in Rockford.
Okay.
And so they attempted to induce me via Cervidil, and her heart rate started to drop to the point where, and this is where it sort of gets blurry. There's some pieces that I remember, and some where like Douglas has to tell me what happened. So we tried the Cervidil, and her heart had almost stopped, and he was actually in the bathroom, and 10 people came flooding into the room and flipped me over onto my hands and knees and had put oxygen on my face. I didn't even know what was going on. I was trying to take a nap, so I was not even aware that her heart rate was dropping because I was out of it too. And that day I was also still struggling with low blood sugar. So the OB comes in and they pull the Cervidil out of my cervix, and the anesthesiologist is talking about putting me under for a C-section, and I immediately start flipping out. Please do not put me under. I've never had any major surgery besides like my wisdom teeth being removed.
Yeah, yeah.
So I am flipping out, and the OB is like, "Okay, okay, we're gonna let you rest for a couple hours. We're gonna try the Cervidil again. Sometimes these babies, they don't tolerate it at first, but then they're fine." And so she leaves the room, and my nurse is helping me like get flipped back over in the bed. And I look at her, I'm like, "Do you think I'm gonna have a C-section?" She's like, "I'm not really supposed to say anything, but I have a feeling you might have a C-section." I was like, "Oh crap." So, Douglas and
But
I
like
just sort of,
that person like breaking it to you gently
yeah,
and
I think she was trying, and I'm explaining to her, like, "Hey, I have an anxiety disorder. Like, I need to know what's gonna happen. So, do
yeah,
you think I'm gonna have a C-section?" And she's like, "You might, but I'm not the doctor, so I'm not
yeah,
gonna tell you."
yeah.
And so a couple hours later, we try the Cervidil again, and it looks like everything is going to work. Her heart rate is fine because I'm on the monitor that's around the belly. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to take a nap. And all of a sudden, I can hear her heart rate. And it's like boom, 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 boom. I'm like, oh, crap. And then there's 10 people back in the room again. And within 2 minutes, I was in the OR.
Yeah.
I remember they pulled Douglas aside. They told him to like gown up and scrub in. He was going to go to the OR, and the anesthesiologist is like telling me everything that's going to happen. The OB's trying to talk to me. I'm in tears because this is all happening so fast. And I remember being in the OR and asking, like, when can Douglas come in? Like, I'm in full panic attack mode. And he comes in, and the next thing I remember, we barely heard her cry. That was one of the first signs that we knew something was
Yep,
wrong.
same, same. Yep.
So, and I feel like I may have skipped ahead a few chapters because we knew about her heart defects before I was even induced.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you're diabetic, they will always do a fetal echocardiogram because they said sometimes with diabetic mothers, there are babies who have heart issues. So when I was like 6 months pregnant, we did a fetal echo and they found a VSD, a
Okay.
large VSD.
Yep.
And we didn't know that we were going to need surgery. We didn't even know we'd need a NICU stay because this cardiologist was like, "We're going to keep an eye on it. These holes close on their own sometimes. It's one of the most common CHDs. So we're just going to keep an eye on it." So every like 2 to 4 weeks, I was having fetal echoes because Emma, she is stubborn outside of the womb and in the womb. So she never wanted to sit still for these echoes.
That
Um,
Summer kept turning her back
that's what
every
Emma
time.
did.
Yep. She's like, no, you don't need to look over here. I'm
And
fine.
when I was pregnant, she was not taking in enough of the amniotic fluid. So I had this huge belly and this tiny little baby. So I'm laying flat on this table for like 2 hours, and every echo was like that. And then the second follow-up fetal echocardiogram we had, we learned about the ASD from a second cardiologist that came in.
Okay.
And this was the cardiologist who was like, hey, I think I want to admit her to the NICU after birth. I just want to do an echo after she's born to see what we're looking at here. Going back to the day that she's born and she's crying, but you can barely hear it. I remember asking, why is she so quiet? And then the doctor was like, do you want to see her? And they lifted her up. She was so small. She was 4 pounds, 9 ounces at 37 weeks. And I remember they shoved her in my face real quick for a picture, and then I didn't see her again for 6 hours. They would not let me into the NICU until I could walk. I had an epidural. I could not feel anything for 6 or 7 hours after the surgery, to the point where I was in the PACU begging them to just let me see her because I could not walk. I could not get into a wheelchair. So they just brought the entire gurney up to the NICU and they put her on my chest. And I got to hold her for, I want to say it was just enough time to get a picture, and then I didn't see her again until the next morning.
Yeah.
So that first night was just so much chaos, and like that's pretty much all I remember from it.
Summer was only in the NICU for 2 weeks. So sometimes I don't feel like I really had that typical NICU experience, right? But everything you just said is triggering to me because
Yeah,
being separated from your child on the first night of their birth, when you have all this concoction of drugs from the C-section, like flooding
yeah,
out of your system, and my baby's not there, and it's just like it's so traumatizing.
it was.
Um,
Yeah,
they really should be rethinking. I mean, everything that we know about how much babies need their moms right after birth and that touch. And I get it in a micro preemie situation, there's got to be some different parameters. Emma was smaller than Summer. Summer was 5 pounds, 7 ounces at 37 weeks. So a little bit bigger, but like still big enough to be held, big
yeah.
enough to feel that connection. So it just,
It was hard because we didn't know truly how sick she was that first night. You know, she wasn't even on oxygen. She was on room air. She did have an NG by the time I saw her the next morning. But I remember thinking, like, why can't she be with me? And that first night, when they took her from me and they took her to the NICU, I told Douglas, you stay with her and do not leave her.
yep.
And he went to the NICU with all these doctors, and they're, spitting all this information out at him. We're new parents. We don't know anything about the NICU. He's trying to take everything in. He's trying to make sure Emma's okay while trying to make sure I'm okay in a different part of the hospital.
Yep.
So the first night was rough, but I've heard from a lot of other NICU parents like, oh, like my kid was only in the NICU for 2 weeks, or maybe they were only in for a week or a few days. So like I feel like my experience isn't valid, but then I explain what happened when Emma was in the NICU, and then they start to resonate with a lot of that too.
I think in a lot of PVS cases, kids spend a lot of that early time in the hospital. For us, it was flipped. We brought her home at 2 weeks. We didn't even discover the PVS until she was almost 3 months old.
Oh
At four
wow.
months old, we flew to Boston. We started tinkering, and that's what really kind of set her off. And she was in the hospital from like 11 months to 17 months.
Wow. This is actually where things start to get crazy. So the day after she's born, there's two cardiologists who were initially on her case.
And
The
this is in
only,
Rockford again.
yeah, the only
Yep.
two pediatric cardiologists in the Rockford area. And so the first one of them comes in the next day, they do an echo, and he comes to us and says, hey, your daughter's VSD closed on its own before she was born, and the ASD is not an ASD, it's like a PDA. So it was
Okay.
a misdiagnosis and it's going to close on its own. Your
Okay.
daughter just needs to take a bottle and she's going to go home. We were so elated. We're like, okay, Emma, you just got to take a bottle. And she already had the NG in because she was too tired the first night. I didn't think anything of it. Birth is traumatic for babies too, so I wasn't
Yep.
at all surprised that she was not taking a bottle. So a few days goes by and she just wasn't taking full volumes. The nurses weren't too concerned about it. They were like, look, most babies stay in the NICU until their due dates. Your daughter's not due for another 3 weeks, so she's probably going to be here like 3 weeks.
Yep.
And then 3 weeks went by and she was not taking a bottle. It got to the point that she needed a nasal cannula. I think she was on like 2 liters. It wasn't high pressure or anything. And we would try to wean her off the cannula. We couldn't do it. She started having a tachypnea, so she was breathing really fast.
Yep.
And we didn't really know why. and just things just started looking weird. And so the cardiologist came in, did another echo. He was like, no, everything's fine. She must be sick. And so we did all kinds of like viral panels. We stuck her, I don't know how many times to get blood.
Hmm.
It was so awful to like go through and like not have answers. And it got to the point where she ended up on CPAP. So I was staying overnight in the hospital probably like the first 2 weeks. And then I started going home every night with Douglas. So we were commuting 45 minutes back and forth every day from the hospital. And they would call us in the middle of the night. And at one point, they called us at 2 in the morning. Hey, she's on CPAP. She's on 7 liters. So they were just letting us know that we're going to have another cardiologist come in. We're going to do another echo because something is not right. The first cardiologist was like, well, there's fluid on her lungs, so she might have the flu or pneumonia or something, but she wasn't. Everything came back fine. So we had this other cardiologist come in. We even had genetics come in because they were afraid that she had Q22 deletion, which is DeGeorge syndrome.
Yep.
And I know a
So
lot
they
of
thought
the,
Summer had that for a little while. Yep.
yeah, and I know a lot of the DeGeorge's kids, a byproduct of that is a heart defect. And so we did very extensive genetic testing on all of us. Nothing. There's nothing wrong. And so the second cardiologist came in, he did an echo. He was like, wait a minute, she's got a very big VSD. She's got this ASD. I think there's something wrong with her pulmonary veins, but I don't know what it is yet. She's going to need surgery. She can't leave the NICU. And this was like November. So now it's starting to hit us. Like, our baby is not coming home for Christmas. We don't know when she's coming home. They will send the baby home on oxygen. They are not sending this baby home on CPAP, especially
Douglas is
not,
trying to figure out how he's gonna
yeah.
like.
He's trying to figure out, and we were having issues with his civilian job as well. Like, he ended up losing that job as well, just due to everything, the nature of PVS and congenital
Yep.
heart defects.
Yep.
My job was actually really understanding. I work in child welfare out in, Rockford, and they were very understanding about my situation. I was able to take leaves of absence and go back part-time. So they were really understanding. Unfortunately, it wasn't the same case for Douglas, but in early December, there was a care conference in Madison because that's where the cardiologist is based out of Madison, Wisconsin. And he presented Emma to a team of cardiothoracic surgeons who decided that she could not wait until the new year to get this hole closed. She was getting worse, and we couldn't just see what happened because she didn't have time. So I remember Douglas had gone back to his civilian job at that point. So I was driving to the NICU by myself every day. And I walk into the NICU, and the nurse comes in and the cardiologist is on the phone, and he's like, what day was this? I think it was like December 14th, maybe. And he was like, hey, so tomorrow we're going to bring Emma to Madison. We need to do a CT because I think there's something wrong with her lungs and I need better imaging. It was a Friday, and that Monday they were going to transfer her.
So
So
you're
I
already
remember,
driving 45 minutes to Madison, and
yes.
they're like, we're gonna drive her 2 hours further away.
Yeah. So, and then the cardiologist came into the hospital and was like, look, I know we said Madison. Lurie's is another good choice. It's really going to be up to you where you want your daughter to receive treatment. So we asked, I said, who do you know at Lurie's? Do you know the surgeon? And he was like, yeah, it's sort of a newer surgeon, but I can vouch for him. He's a very good surgeon. But I also know the surgeon in Madison who's been doing this for decades. He's very, very good at what he does. And knowing Chicago traffic, I go to Chicago regularly for work. I hate Chicago traffic. And I'm thinking in my head, what does that drive to Lurie's going to look like every day versus if we go to Madison? And at this point, I didn't know that both places had a Ronald McDonald House.
Yep.
So we actually ended up choosing Madison just because we felt it was going to be an easier commute, and she's already in the UW healthcare system. Everybody knows her. So that's why we ended up going with Madison. So that weekend, Douglas is letting his civilian boss know. He's like, hey, my daughter needs open heart surgery. I know I don't qualify for FMLA yet because he hadn't been with this job for a year. So they gave him even more time off. And we were like panic packing at home that weekend. It was right before Christmas, so I was like making Christmas gifts for all the NICU nurses in Rockford. It was a crazy weekend. And so Monday, we have the car packed up. We get to Rockford because they want to take her by helicopter to Madison. And then they're like, hey, we can't transfer her today. There's been a school shooting in Madison, and all the hospitals are on lockdown. And we're like, what?
Oh my God.
Yeah, there was a school shooting. I think it was at like a Catholic school or a Christian school somewhere there in Madison. A couple of the victims were brought to UW-Madison American Family Children's. And so the hospital was on lockdown. They were not taking new patients. And so they're like, we're going to do this tomorrow. And we were already so used to like this hurry up and wait, or you're
Yep.
being told something's going to happen, but then it
Yep.
doesn't. Yeah. And then a few hours later, the neonatologist comes in. He's like, change of plans. Hospital's open back up. We're taking her tonight.
Oh my
But we can't
God.
take her by helicopter because of the like, it was like raining that day. They didn't want to take a helicopter. So
Okay.
they're like, we have to wait from Madison to send an ambulance down to Rockford. And then we're going to take her by ambulance and you guys can just follow. So we're like, okay. She's never been in a vehicle before. She has lived
Yep.
in a little NICU bassinet her entire life. At this
Yep.
point, she's barely 2 months old. And so they packed her up and like I don't know if Summer's ever been in one, in the little ambulance, little incubator that they put them in.
She
And
was
you can
never again, like we've been on air ambulances, plenty of
oh
ground ambulances, but she was always bigger.
no, Emma was in this like you could barely see it. It was covered in all kinds of stuff, but you could hear her screaming. She hated it. And that was the worst. You can't comfort her.
Yep.
And so they had a couple of nurses on the ambulance with her, and Douglas drove. I was actually sick that night. I think it was a combination of just stress and
Nerves and yeah.
yeah. And I've never seen him drive so fast. We beat the ambulance to Madison. Like we got to Madison, and I said, we're here. We're explaining her name. And they're like, oh, she's not here yet. By the time they got there and they got her settled in and everything, I think she had a CT scan the next day. And that's where the PVS started coming into play. Like, hey,
Yep.
there's something seriously wrong.
Yep.
She had a CT scan the next morning, and there was no indication that anything was like found at first. And then I want to say, probably towards the end of the day, the cardiologist came in, or the cardiac team, and they're like, so this is really interesting. Your daughter was only born with three pulmonary veins.
Mm.
And we didn't know anything about pulmonary veins, so we're just like, okay, well, like, why is this special?
Yeah. It's a
And
vein. You're like, oh, a
yeah,
vein. Whatever. We
and
have a lot of veins.
yeah, and
Like, no, this
so
one special vein that only does this one special thing that nothing else in your body can actually replicate.
yeah, and so they were like, and at that point we always called Emma a medical enigma because it just seemed like there was always something else wrong with her that nobody could explain.
Yep.
And so now they're going through imaging from when I was pregnant with her, and they're like, wait a minute, she had four pulmonary veins at one point. And so they did more imaging and found that her right pulmonary vein was completely scarred shut to the point where you almost can't see it.
The
Like, I
right
guess on a
upper or
CT,
right lower? Sorry, I
right
think
upper.
right upper.
Yeah. And
Which is
so that's,
always, I feel like the right upper is Summers was completely routed, funky, didn't make any sense. Like that was part of her open heart surgery was to reroute that. But I feel
yeah.
like everyone's starts like either left upper or right upper, but I always feel like that right upper is like,
Yeah. And so not only was her right upper pulmonary vein just completely scarred shut, only two-thirds of her right lung functions.
okay,
And so we thought, okay, like that's odd. And that's when the cardiothoracic surgeon came to us, and he's like, your daughter has this thing called pulmonary vein stenosis and it's pretty severe. So I said, okay, well, can you fix this in the heart surgery? Because she was due to have surgery like a week, or I don't even think it was a week. I think it was like a few days. And they were like, oh, well, we can't do the heart surgery now because we don't know what to do with this. And I was like, what?
you're like, I just transferred her here from Rockford instead of Chicago.
Yeah.
Oh
And they
no.
were like, we don't really see this a lot. The doctor we had talked to had barely seen it in his career. So we're asking him, like, okay, well, what's the plan now? And he looked at us and was like, well, we don't know. And yeah, so full, crash out moment for me and Douglas. Like, you guys are supposed to be experts. What do you mean you don't know what you're doing? You don't know what to do. Our daughter is, essentially dying. She's getting worse. She needs more respiratory support. Yeah.
I'm so
So
sorry. Oh, that had
yeah,
to be
so they,
devastating.
yeah. And so they wanted to do the surgery, I think like 2 days before Christmas was the original plan. And then they decided not to. So I'm already super depressed. My daughter's spending her very first Christmas in the NICU. She's never been outside of a NICU room. And it's like I had our whole house decorated for Christmas because I thought she was going to come home. I had two Christmas trees. I had a little pink tree in her room. I had lights everywhere. So, that part alone was devastating. Your kid's in the
Yeah.
hospital during the holiday season. And
The
so
nurses in the hospital try to do their best to
they do.
but it is not the same. It is not a substitute for being home with your child.
It's not. Douglas's grandparents, they're actually over watching Emma right now, but they came up and met Emma for the first time when she was first admitted to Madison. And they brought her like a little Christmas tree for her room and they brought presents for her. And it was so sweet. We brought stuff to decorate. We stayed at the Ronald McDonald House and they had a stocking just for Emma that had like dolls and toys and stuff in it. So that was really thoughtful.
Ronald
And
McDonald is amazing.
they were a
Like, yeah.
lifesaver.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we waited. She had her first cardiac cath procedure. What day was that? It was the day after Christmas. It was December 26th. They brought her to the cath lab and the
So
cardiac inter
the surgery's still on hold,
yeah, they
and they're
have not
like, we're gonna
scheduled
take her in and
surgery.
do a cardiac cath.
Yeah, so
Okay.
they thought, let's just stent this pulmonary vein. Because if we can stent it, then we don't have to worry about it in surgery. We can just focus on the holes in her heart and getting those repaired.
Yep.
So they take her into the cath lab. I don't even know how long she was gone for. It wasn't very long. From start to finish, it was maybe like 5 or 6 hours, just like with prep and everything. She had to be intubated for it. So they brought her back, and the interventionalist was like, yeah, there's no saving this vein. There's nothing we can do. It's gone. He was like, her lower right vein is about to get just as bad. If we don't get in soon, she's going to lose that. And then we're going to have a conversation about her living with one lung. And that's when we started to panic. The cardio surgeon came in, and I want to say it was probably like 3 days before the surgery that they finally scheduled it because he had this plan. He wanted to go in and close her VSD while leaving her ASD open. That way, there wasn't too much pressure being created in the heart. And
And
he
for
wanted,
access to the pulmonary veins,
yeah,
right? Like that's what we
yeah,
are always told.
that's what they told us. And then he wanted to reconstruct her right side pulmonary veins. He said, I want to go in there. I want to widen where the veins meet with the heart. That's really scarred. So I want to widen that. Eventually she will need to be stented, but I want to buy you guys as much time as possible. If I can get this widened and reconstructed, she might not need to see a cath lab for like 6 months. Or ideally not until she's just bigger because at this point she was maybe like 9 pounds before surgery.
Yep.
So January 6th, she had her first open heart surgery. I think the whole process was like 14 hours. It was a very, very long day.
Yep.
It was terrifying at first because you're handing your baby over to these strangers and
Mm-hmm.
her heart's going to be stopped. She's going to be cracked open and you just hope she's going to come back okay. So that was pretty nerve wracking. And I think it was like 7 o'clock at night. We got a call from the surgeon. Hey, come to the waiting room. I'm going to talk to you about how the surgery went. And so we talked to him before we could see Emma. And he was like, the surgery went beautifully. I got to do everything I wanted to do. She was great under anesthesia. He was worried that she would need a pacemaker. And that was not the case. She was on an external one, just as like a typical after
Yep.
surgery thing.
Summer had that. Yep.
Um, but she didn't need like an internal one placed. She came off of bypass just fine. We were
Yep.
worried about that. He was able to close the hole. He was able to widen the intersection of the pulmonary veins. And so we got to go in and see her after that. That is a rough thing to see if you've never, your baby obviously had open heart surgery, so you're very familiar with that. But that was kind of rough. She had a central line in her neck. She had something coming out of her groin, the chest tubes, the catheter, all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
She was swollen beyond recognition. I came into the room and
Mm-hmm.
started crying, and I was like, why does she look like that?
Yeah.
Mind you, Emma was like this tiny little peanut at the time. And
Yep.
they were like, oh, that's normal. It'll go down, but it's gonna get worse first.
Yep.
I was like, oh God, okay. And so the next couple days, now we're just waiting. She's very feisty, having the tube in. Whenever anybody touched her, her blood pressure would skyrocket to the point where like we couldn't even really touch her. I would touch like the very top of her head, which is like pretty much the only place we could touch. We'd read to her and sing to her and talk to her. So that was a Monday. And on Wednesday, the surgeon wanted to do an echo just to make sure everything was fine. If you are not familiar with the Madison area, The Children's Hospital is right next to the VA hospital in Madison. I go to the VA, I'm insulin dependent, and I had to go to the hospital for a follow up and to get a refill of my insulin. And so Douglas drove me. It's like a 2 minute drive between hospitals. And he's in the waiting room, and I'm coming out and I'm trying to tell him, like, oh, they just gave me a flu shot. And he's on the phone and he is like looking at me with a 1,000 yard stare. And he was like, the surgeon is on the phone. We need to go back to the hospital right now. He needs to open up Emma again. And I don't even remember, this is the part where I get so choked up. I don't even remember going. I think we ran to the parking garage, and I don't run. I don't even remember getting into the car. I remember we were all the way back in her room, and the surgeon is sitting us down, and he's
Yeah.
got the model of the heart in front of us, and he was like, her aortic valve is leaking, and I don't know why. He said, I don't know if a stitch from the VSD went through her aorta. I don't know what happened, but I need to go back in there and figure out what happened. And I don't know how I'm going to fix it until I open her back up.
Oh my God.
And I went into full blown panic mode. I looked at Douglas and I said, I don't think we're bringing our baby home. And that was the first time that it truly hit me that our daughter might not come home. The nurse is talking to us, and the surgeon is obviously trying to comfort. And he's looking at Emma. He's like, I know things are bad right now, but she is a fighter. And this is a little girl who wants to fight and she wants to be here. So the very next morning, they took her in first thing in the morning. And it was another long procedure. I think she was gone like 10 or 11 hours. And when they came back, the surgeon was like, these babies' hearts, they are so small. And these vessels are so small. A needle that was used in the surgery nicked her aortic valve, and that's why it leaked. He was like, I was able to go in there and patch it, but the aortic valve at this age is so thin and it can basically, if this patch doesn't hold, we're going to be looking at a valve replacement
Oh
or something
no.
along those lines. So he was like, we have to keep her still. Like, she can't move. So they sedated her even more. They had her on blood pressure medications because they just had a really hard time getting her blood pressure under control. So then they were worried about the pulmonary hypertension at that point. He was like, we're not going to know if this is going to work for like 2 days, and we'll do another echo. So 48 hours later, after the second emergency surgery, they did another echo, and thankfully the patch had held. Her VSD was good. He said that the second surgery was less risky than the first one because he was able to widen those pulmonary veins. And he said it was the PVS that made that first surgery so complicated.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, so I think she was intubated for, I want to say almost 2 weeks after that. It was a long time. She
Yep.
was intubated for a total of about 3 weeks. And then they went ahead and extubated her. She was, what was she on? Is it the nitrous or the nitric oxide? She was on the
Yep.
nitric.
Yep.
They were able to wean her from that before they extubated her, and then she was back on CPAP, and then she did eventually wean back down to a regular nasal cannula. We ideally wanted her completely weaned to room air before bringing her home because you try to imagine, and like I know Summer is on the nasal cannula,
We're still on
and
nasal
so
cannula with a kid that's running around and getting caught on things. And
yeah,
so her eyeballs look like they're gonna pop out because she's pulling so like she's figured out how to pull like
yeah.
with her face as hard as she can and so she can keep running.
And my biggest fear, and I know this sounds trivial now, but I'm like, okay, I am the parent who does all the grocery shopping. I run all the errands. I take Emma to her appointments. How am I going to push a stroller and bring an oxygen tank
You figure it
everywhere?
out. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am you teared up going back to that place where you were, not sure that you were going to bring Emma home. And that certainly hits hard for me right now. But I'm in the emotional space currently of just really struggling with the delays and the cares. Like Summer's still 100% tube fed. She's having regression on feeding. She's having some regression with even speech, and the oxygen is just this constant battle. Like you're at a year old, and there's so much hope, and we still have a lot of hope for Summer. She started walking. She didn't start walking until she was
Oh,
3. It took until 3 years old to get physically strong enough to make that giant leap. And so it's very normal, even in I am told, I am not an expert, but I am told it's very normal with typical kids. Once they achieve a milestone in one area, they may regress in other areas. And so right now we're just struggling with those regressions, being tethered to the oxygen, but it doesn't hold us back entirely. We took summer down to Wisconsin Dells to
I
go
saw that. Yeah.
camping. Like we are, trying to give her the life that we want for her and that she so deserves. But there are some days where it's like, no, honey, I don't really want to go outside right now because I don't want to flip you over to the oxygen tank and I don't want to do the 5 steps involved. And then that makes you feel like a crappy parent, right? You're just like,
Yeah.
ooh, I don't feel like, yeah, we could go to the park right now, but I have to pack up this med and these syringes for the feeds and this and it feels like a lot some days.
Yeah, we're definitely like that with the G tube. Before we went home for the first time, she had the NG, and we were like, hey, this girl loves to rip her NG out. We are not going home 2 hours away from this hospital with an NG. Please put in a
Smart,
G tube.
smart. Yep.
So, and because we tried to give her the bottle, she was on full oral, not oral aversion because she loves her pacifier, but she did not want that bottle. So we put a G tube in, we went home. We're in that same stage now, just constant G tube feeds. She gets 6 feeds a day, but it's okay. It's every 3 hours. So if we're going to go out, we have to time it between feeds. That way we don't have to lug the pump everywhere or
Yep.
pack extra formula and meds. She gets sildenafil in the middle of the day. So it's like
Yep.
you got to pack up basically your whole life before you go to the grocery store or to the park.
Yep.
But yeah,
You do get better at it, right?
yeah,
Like, I mean, it's unfair and there's so many times where like I look at a mom who's frustrated with her kids and they're like just being normal kids and that's her difficult, right?
yeah,
Sometimes I'm looking and going, what do you have to be mad about? Look at me, I'm like
exactly.
here carrying oxygen and like 10 syringes and blah blah blah, but then it's all your reality and I think you do get better at dealing with it even if it's unfair, and our kids get better at it too. Like Summer,
Yeah,
like she's a normal 3-year-old in that she is testing boundaries, right?
yeah,
That's a normal part of her development is the three-nager trying to test all the boundaries. And one of those boundaries is how far can I go on this oxygen cannula?
yeah. Yeah. So we went home on the G tube. Things were good. We actually ended up inpatient just 3 weeks after going home for the first time.
Mm,
She essentially was having her pressures in her pulmonary veins were as bad as they were before her first open heart surgery. I think they were at like a 13, and her oxygen, she was not on oxygen at the time. We went home, no oxygen, not even at night. And when we brought her in for a follow-up echo, her oxygen was sitting at like 82.
mm,
And so they emergency transport back to Madison that same day. And she had her second cath procedure, and this time she was stented. We were there longer than expected. The first day that she was supposed to go to the cath lab, I guess another kid's cath procedure turned into a full on surgery. So Emma's was pushed back. So the next day they went in, they were able to balloon and stent. They kept her intubated, I think, for I want to say like probably 24 or 36 hours after the procedure. We did go home on oxygen, but only at night because we noticed that during the day when she's up and awake, her oxygen was fine. But when she falls asleep, she starts dipping 80s, 70s.
yep,
Like she needs oxygen at night.
yep,
So to this day, she only gets a quarter liter of oxygen when she's sleeping.
yep. Just enough to give her that baseline. Summer is at half a liter 24/7, but we are starting to do some weans at night. It's easier to keep them on pulse ox at night.
Yeah,
Then, of course, when they're moving around during the day, it's like impossible. Her pulmonologist is of the mindset that Summer will probably come off of oxygen before she comes off of tube feeds, which I'm
right.
like, at this point, I'm like, I will take either of those would be
Yep.
like,
Either of
I
those
will
is a
take
win.
even oxygen just at night would be a huge step forward for her, for a kid that's moving and ready to
Yeah.
go, right? But when she's running around, the fear is what's her oxygenation at? And you can't be pulse oxing her when she's tearing around the living room,
Especially
right?
when they're not always symptomatic. So when we
Right.
found out that Emma was having low oxygen, she was not showing symptoms. Like she was a normal, not normal, but normal in our sense of a 4-month-old baby. But so there's been times where we've been able to wean her off of oxygen at night. I think the longest she's been without oxygen is like 8 nights. And then she'll either, I work with children, I work in child welfare. I try as hard as I can to not bring germs home. But sometimes it happens and she
Yep.
will catch whatever cold I have and she will just need that oxygen again.
Yep. Yep.
But when we were back inpatient for her second cath procedure, this time she had been stented. I had started to do some research, Google, Facebook. I joined that pulmonary vein stenosis group,
Yep.
and
It's a
I
wonderful
started,
group.
yeah, I started reading. Actually, I think it was on Google. I started reading about kids who had been put on this drug, sirolimus, and it was showing really good promise for babies who have PVS. So I went to the interventionalist who does the cath procedures and I said, I'm reading about this drug, sirolimus, and I think it might help. Are you open to discussing it? And he's like, it's funny you'd bring that up because I want to put her on it and I was coming to talk to you about it. Um,
I'm so glad you brought this up because that was in the back of my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh,
yeah.
she's needing a cast so quickly after. She wasn't put on any
No,
drugs.
when we went home after the 4 month NICU stay, she went home on enalapril, so stuff for heart failure, aspirin, and a couple of other things that she's not on now, but nothing specifically for her pulmonary vein stenosis. And he said, I worked in Colorado. I've used this drug on babies in Colorado, and it's showing really good results. I want to try it on Emma. She was the youngest child in that area to be put on that medication. And so they put her on it. And the last time that she has needed the cath procedure was March of this year. And we are halfway through October now.
That's awesome.
Um, she gets echoes about every 2 to 3 months. Her last echo was the end of September. And we did notice that her pressures in her pulmonary veins are going up. So, of
Yeah.
course, I panicked and immediately went to the Facebook group. Oh my God, her pressures are going up. What do we do? And I called her cardiologist, and he was like, look, usually we look for other symptoms. She's not having other symptoms.
Yep.
Her oxygen is fine. But instead of seeing you in 6 months, I want to see you at the end of November. So we're going to go back and do a follow-up echo just to see what's going on. Usually her pressures have remained around a 6. And so when I saw in his report that it went up to 11, I was like, oh God, oh no. But I think the sirolimus has bought us so much time.
It,
She's on a ton of other medications though, too.
yeah, I want to say we're like 20 syringes a day of medications.
Yeah, and then Emma, she's still, she relies on that tube. She's eating more by mouth now.
Good.
Some things she'll eat by mouth. She only just now started taking small sips from like a sippy cup.
Oh, good.
Where before she didn't want any liquid in her mouth. But
We've had a lot of success with this honey bear cup.
Emma has a honey bear cup. She likes that too.
Summer love, I mean, she almost exclusively drinks out of the honey bear cup.
Yeah, Emma hasn't quite got the hang of like, okay, I need to suck on the straw to
The
get stuff
straw, yeah,
out.
yeah.
But
Yep.
we will squeeze it. And she likes, sometimes we'll put water in there. We'll put like almond milk in there. And she likes that. She eats some things by mouth, but she's not eating enough to sustain her. So we are still
No.
fully tube reliant. When we first came home from the hospital, we were doing Q3 feeds. So every 3 hours, even throughout the night, we were not sleeping. Douglas was feeding her at 9 p.m. and midnight, and I was feeding her at 3 a.m., 6 a.m., 9 a.m., and we would just switch off back and forth.
Yep.
Luckily, his grandparents, they actually learned how to use the pump. They learned how to administer her medications. So they are over here several times a week and they do all of her feeds. They know how to change out the bag. They know what medications. They will draw up her medications too. Like they are
Wow.
just very well versed in it. So that has helped a ton too. So we've actually been able to eliminate nighttime feedings. She gets her last feed of the day at 9 p.m. when she's already asleep. And then she wakes up. Last few days have been rough. I think she's in a sleep regression. It's
Those
been
are
rough
so
around
fun.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like this morning she woke up at 5 and I fed her at 6. So like she'll start at 6 a.m. and get her last feed at 9 p.m.
My in-laws were similarly helpful, how to use the pump and wash the bags and,
Yep.
prep between feeds. And they spent a lot of time in Boston with me because we got stuck out there and we would have her out of
Yeah.
the hospital, but then back in the hospital. And yeah, back to we were talking earlier, from Douglas's higher ups advocating for him to the family members who step in for you.
Yeah.
understanding employers. We have a wonderful social worker in our county that we work with. So like all those supports are so important. And
Yeah.
we talk about like trying to figure out how to get Emma to drink and eat and all those things. Like medical trauma is, it's not that well understood. There's not that many experts to go around for how many kids have it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember one of the people on the cardiac team, I think it was actually one of the surgeons, was like, hey, if Emma had been born 5 or 10 years ago, we would not be having a conversation about trying to save her life. We
Well,
would be having a conversation about sending her home and making her comfortable with
yep.
whatever time she's going to have. And that's when I realized, like, oh my God, like, they really don't know a lot about this.
No,
Yeah.
it's, yeah. You said something earlier and I was gonna mention, oh, like Emma struggling to drink. And
Yeah.
I've talked about this person before. Her name is Christina Ireland. She's the NP in Boston. And anybody who's been treated in Boston, she's just, this woman is so smart and a saint, and she's just seen so many things. She used to always say, Summer is just protecting herself, right? Like
Yeah.
kids who don't want to take food by mouth, a lot of times it's just that whether it's aspiration we know or it's just these silent micro aspiration events, it's like they're smart. They're doing what they can to protect themselves. And sometimes drinking by mouth is dangerous for them. And
Yeah.
I have always, I think in some ways that's made me overly cautious to really push her. And it's a struggle because I think that the speech language pathologists and, therapists are right, right? You want to make it a good experience introducing your children to food and drink, but there also comes a point where like Summer's getting all of her needs met. Like we're overfeeding her by tube, right? Like they would
Yeah.
rather just pump and pump and pump them full of food. She's not hungry. She's not incentivized to eat,
Right.
right? And frankly, like right now, I think because she's in a clingy stage with mom too, she's not
Yeah.
incentivized to talk. I meet all of her needs. I know what she needs, right? So
Yeah.
like how do you get a kid who's immune compromised? Sorry, these are like my passion points right now because
Yeah.
I've just we're we're struggling. Like you fight really hard. You've talked about Emma's a fighter, right?
Yeah.
When Summer was in the NICU, they would call her spicy. And they're like
That's
the
funny because they would call Emma spicy
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
too.
And they're like the spicy ones are the survivors, right? Like
Yep.
you need the kid to be a fighter. You need them to be a little spicy. But
Yeah.
then how do you help them develop when they have their own? I mean, Summer can walk and get a, it's like how do you help her develop to the best of her ability when all you've been doing for 3.5 years is to keep her alive?
Yeah.
We're in a weird, interesting pivot right now. And I'm so glad that Emma has made it to a year like that. I mean, statistically, right? Like if they can
Yeah.
make it to a year, right? The next kind of point we were told, okay, the first year or two is going to be the hardest.
Yeah.
And then things are going to get better. But age 4 is really then where they kind of, they're big enough, they start to outgrow, right? And
Yeah.
we're so close on the precipice of that. And it's yeah, it's a lot. I wouldn't wish this disease on anyone.
No, no. And I think now she has her delays. She's crawling, but she's only belly crawling. She won't go on her hands and knees. She's very limited in what she'll eat. And we work with early intervention. They're out here pretty much every week at this point,
Yep.
multiple therapies. We actually just found out Emma is almost completely deaf in her left ear.
Oh.
So when now we're adding in developmental hearing therapy, she's going to be fitted with a hearing aid. We'll explore that avenue first. If that doesn't work out, we'll need to consider a cochlear implant. She's in all these therapies and she's getting so much stronger, and you want to push her, but at the same time, it's like, okay, you've already been through so much. I don't want to push you too hard. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to like coddle you either. especially when it comes to like drinking liquids. She did have an issue with aspirating when she was in the NICU. And I think that created a lot of trauma for her dad and I, to the point where it's like we really didn't push liquids on her and haven't a whole lot. You know, we dealt with chronic vomiting too for months.
Oh,
Um,
we still do.
yeah,
We
we
still
were
do.
projectile vomiting every single feed, every single day, but nobody really like cared because she was gaining weight.
Yep.
But you know, that slowed down a little bit when we changed formulas. But of course, that whole incident in the NICU sort of even scared me from trying to give her a bottle or forcing the sippy on her. It's like even now I'll give her the sippy and I'll put a little bit of just like regular milk in it and she'll take a couple sips and I don't really push after that. So I think it's just one of those things that the more we, you know, not get over it, but sort of work through our own trauma of her being in the NICU, it'll be a lot easier to sort of push her to do these other normal baby things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head, right? Like, how do you push them in a way that's like supportive and helping them develop, but also not traumatize them, not traumatize yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so like you're constantly like dancing this dance of trying to help them develop, not coddle them, but also recognize that they haven't had a normal childhood, right? Like
Right.
their normal is not normal, and like your normal is not normal.
Right.
Like it's hard. I feel like we dance around a little bit of how did they figure out the pulmonary hypertension?
So that was sort of discovered after, I want to say after the second open heart surgery. So we noticed she was having issues with her blood pressure after the first open heart surgery. They were not too concerned. They were just like, hey, she just had this major surgery. She's only 2 months old. We're not super worried. We're going to keep an eye on it. And then after the second open heart surgery, like if anybody tried to touch her, or they have to move her arm or do IVs and like cares and change her diaper and check the catheter, and her blood pressure was like skyrocketing. She was in distress. And that's when they were like, hey, she's got this pulmonary hypertension too. She's probably going to grow out of it, but it's going to be a while. And they
Mhm.
basically said, because of this hypertension, she's going to need this oxygen and eventually she'll outgrow it. And I don't think we've outgrown it yet. She's still oxygen dependent at night. There's been a couple nights where we can sort of let her go without oxygen. Like even last night, she pulls at her cannula in her sleep. So she was alarming like all last night. She kept pulling the cannula and then she was desatting. So yeah, it was after that second surgery that they sort of discovered that pulmonary hypertension.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier, right? Like the girls love to be cold. I've definitely gotten some, unhelpful comments or stares from an older generation bringing her outside in what appears to be bad parenting, but like you try putting a jacket on this kid at 40 degrees. She wants
Yeah,
to be outside in a long sleeve t-shirt. Like she
I
does not like to be hot.
when it's funny because Emma's birthday was last week, so we took her to the mall and we were in Carter's getting onesies, and there was this one that I really liked, but it was like fleece. And Douglas is like, you know, she can't wear that. She's gonna melt. She's gonna sweat.
Yeah.
It's like even this morning, I think it was probably like 50 degrees, and
Yep.
Emma loves to sit on the porch. She loves to be outside and watch the birds. So I was holding on to her, and she's sitting on like our little railing, watching people pass by, and she loves it.
So that wraps my conversation with Haley. Thanks for your time, Haley. It was a pleasure talking to you, as it has been with all of the other PVS moms who shared on behalf of their PVS warriors and their families this year. This has been such a rewarding experience, and I'm so grateful for everybody who has participated and listened and reached out to say how much it has meant to them to feel not so alone. I wish everybody has a wonderful holiday season, end of the year, and all the best to your PVS warriors and families. Thanks for listening.